Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome God Radio. I'm your host, Nelson E. Brown, and I would like to thank you all again for tuning into another show. Education is a hot topic in the nation's history. Well, it's a hot topic around the country, but I think that it's safe to say, and it's suffice it to say that we all are talking about the national teacher shortage here in America, not just throughout the city of Baltimore, not just throughout the state of Maryland, but we have been talking about the national teacher shortage throughout the entire country. So our students are getting accustomed to getting back into the swing of things for the fall season and for the academic school year around the country. It's been about a couple of weeks since a lot of students in Maryland have gotten accustomed to a new schedule after being, on summer vacation for the past few months and after having their Labor Day weekend last week. And it's definitely it's been a challenge for a lot of the parents and a lot of the people throughout the community to really um, accommodate the fact that there is still a teacher shortage within each and every school system throughout the state of Maryland and specifically Baltimore City. But before I move forward, I thank you all for tuning in, but I also want to take a moment of silence um, to recognize the September 11th, 2001, and the events that transpired. Okay. Now, as we move forward, I have a very special guest this evening. I met this young lady a couple of months ago, back in May during Memorial Day. I didn't formally meet her, but I actually had an opportunity to sit and listen to an assembly in a school concert, a performance, a spring concert at an elementary school in Baltimore City. And I met Miss April Christina Curly. She is one of the school board candidates for the city school board. So she is going to be one of the candidates for the general election in November. So she agreed to hop on the show with me to talk about her work as an educator and to talk about her campaign. So we are going to get to her in about 10 to 15 minutes. So she's going to hop on and she's going to tell you all about her campaign. So she won the primary. She's one of the school board candidates in the election, in the primary election, who won the primary. Excuse me for 1 minute, you guys. As I was saying, I'm sorry, I got distracted by something, but as I was saying, um, Miss April Christina Curly is one of the school board candidates for the general election in November. So she won the primary for the city school board election this past spring and summer, but she's here to talk about her work as an educator. Now, she knows more than anyone. She's one of the educators who has been behind the scenes and who has been in the classroom and who's um, had that type of influence as an educator to really reach children and to really reach the students in the classroom. So she knows what it's like to be an educator in the city school system. I think that it's safe to say that a lot of you guys know a lot of the issues that are prominent throughout the school system, and a lot of you guys know the ins and outs of what's going on. But she's going to be able to talk to us about what we can do to really remedy this. I mean, there are generations of students that are being affected by many of the controversial issues that have taken place, not just throughout the city of Baltimore, but even throughout this country. But I was watching and listening to the PBS NewsHour, and I pulled an article that spoke about the teacher shortages. It's called "Teacher Shortages: A Reality as Schools Struggle to Fill New Positions." So the PBS NewsHour, they were in Birmingham, Alabama, and they were able to speak about the struggles that the school systems in Alabama and even throughout the country, let's be real, even throughout the country, what they've struggled with throughout the course of the pandemic in terms of retaining teachers and really making the job flexible enough for them and for the parents and for the students. Um, the struggle with that, even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic taking place. So I'll just read about it a little bit so that you guys can get a taste of what we'll be talking about this evening with Miss April Christina Curly. She'll be speaking to us about the teacher shortages throughout the city of Baltimore and her experience as an educator and as a candidate, reaching out to community members and as it pertains to her working with the students behind the scenes, which is what many people don't get a chance or opportunity to really do. The article from the PBS NewsHour says that everywhere it seems back to school has been shadowed by worries of a teacher shortage. The U.S. Education Secretary has called for investment to keep teachers from quitting. A teachers union leader has described it as a fire alarm emergency. News coverage has warned of a crisis in teaching. In reality, there is little evidence to suggest teacher turnover has increased nationwide or educators are leaving in drones. And it says that certainly many schools have struggled to find enough educators, but the challenges are related more to hiring, especially for non teaching staff positions. Schools flush with federal pandemic relief money are creating new positions and struggling to fill them at a time of low unemployment and stiff competition for workers of all kinds. And just to be mindful, this article was written and released yesterday. Since well before the COVID-19 pandemic, schools have had difficulty recruiting enough teachers in some regions, particularly in parts of the South. Fields like special education and bilingual education have been critically short on teachers nationwide. For some districts, shortages have meant children have fewer or less qualified instructors. In rural Alabama's Black Belt, there were no certified math teachers last year in Bullock County's public middle school. And the county's former superintendent stated that it really impacts the children because they're not learning what they need to learn. And he also states that when you have these uncertified, emergency, or inexperienced teachers, students are in classrooms where they're not going to get the level of rigor and classroom experiences. While the nation lacks vacancy data in several states, national pain points are obvious. For starters, the pandemic kicked off the largest drop in education employment ever. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the number of people employed in public schools dropped from almost 8.1 million in March 2020 to 7.3 million in May. Employment has grown back to 7.7 million since then, but that still leaves schools short around 360,000 positions. And Chad Adelman is a policy director at the Edunomics Lab at Georgetown University, and he says that we're still trying to dig out of that hole. It's unknown how many of those positions lost, were teaching jobs or other staff members like bus drivers, support positions that schools are having an especially hard time filling. And a RAND survey of school leaders this year found that around 3/4 of school leaders say they are trying to hire more substitutes. 58% are trying to hire more bus drivers, and 43% are trying to hire more tutors. Still, the problems are not as tied to teachers quitting as many have suggested. Teacher surveys have indicated many considered leaving their jobs. They're under pressure to keep kids safe from guns, catch them up academically, and deal with pandemic challenges with mental health and behavior. Now, the National Education Association union leader, Becky Pringle, tweeted in April, the educator shortage is a fire alarm crisis, but a Brown University study found turnover largely unchanged among states that had data. Quit rates in education rose slightly this year, but that's true for the nation as a whole. And teachers remain far more likely to stay in their job than a typical worker. Hiring has been so difficult largely because of an increase in the number of open positions. Many schools indicated plans to use federal relief money to create new jobs, in some cases looking to hire even more people than they had pre-pandemic. Some neighboring schools are competing for fewer applicants as enrollment in teacher prep programs, colleges, has declined. The Upper Darby School District in Pennsylvania has around 70 positions it is trying to fill, especially bus drivers, lunch aides, and substitute teachers, but it cannot find enough applicants. The district has warned families it may have to cancel school or switch to remote learning on days when it lacks substitutes. It becomes a financial competition from district to district to do that, and that's unfortunate for children and communities who deserve the same opportunities everywhere in the state. That was a statement that was given by a superintendent The superintendent's name is Danielle McGarry. The number of unfilled vacancies has led some states and school systems to ease credential requirements in order to expand the pool of applicants. The U.S. Education Secretary Miguel Cardona told reporters last week that creative approaches are needed to bring in more teachers, such as retired educators, but schools must not lower the standards. Schools in the South are more likely to struggle with teacher vacancies. A federal survey found an average of 3.4 teaching vacancies per school as of this summer. That number was lowest in the West, with 2.7 vacancies on average, and highest in the South, with 4.2 vacancies. Some other statements were provided by some of the teachers and educators throughout that community. The school system in Moss Point, a small town near the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, has increased wages to entice more applicants, but other districts nearby have done the same. Some teachers realized that they could make $30,000 more by working 30 minutes away in Mobile, Alabama. In Birmingham, the school district is struggling to fill around 50 teaching spots, including 15 in special education, despite a $10,000 signing bonus for each special ed teacher. Janika Oglesby, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, a human resources officer for the district, says the problem owes in part to low salaries in the South that don't always offset a lower cost of living. A Mobile County Schools teacher said, human resources director for the Most Point district says that I personally lost some really good teachers to Mobile County Schools, and she also lost some not so great teachers. She added, people who broke their contracts and quit 3 days before the school year started. So that's a lot. So I'm going to read a little bit more of this before we speak about it a little. Michelle Dallas, a teacher resident in Moss Point first grade classroom, recently switched from a career in mental health, from a career into mental health, and is confident she is meant to be a teacher. She said, that's why I'm here. She stated that to fulfill my calling. A bright spot for Moss Point this year is 4 student teachers from the University of Southern Mississippi. They will spend the school year working with children as part of a residency program for aspiring educators. The state has invested almost $10 million of federal relief money into residency programs with the hope the residents will stay and become teachers in their assigned districts. It's the job that makes all others possible, yet they get paid once a month and they can go to Chick-fil-A in some places and make more money. This was a response provided by Miss Tanisha Bastis, the Human Resources Director for the Moss Point District. So let's unpack that a little and talk about the teacher shortage. Now, again, Miss April Christina Curly will be on in a few minutes to talk about her work as an educator throughout the city school system here in Baltimore, but she'll also talk about her work as a candidate for the general election for the Baltimore City School Board in November. This is an historical election. I want you all to take a moment and pause and really think about what I've just shared with you guys. Now, we have just shared some stats from the PBS NewsHour. These stats pertained to what the teacher shortages actually look like for states in the South. Now, I haven't even gotten to the states in the northern states, but I think that again, we need to really, really think about what the future looks like for the children in the school systems around the country this year. I know that all the time here in Baltimore, we always watch the news and we always hear about the national teacher shortages and the local ones, but I think that we all need to figure out how we are really going to step up to the plate as parents, as community members, and even as students, in college. I think that, again, even college students, we need a lot of resources. We need a lot of support. I shared with you all before that I'm pursuing my master's program in applied psychology at the University of Maryland in Baltimore County. I've wrapped up my studies as an undergraduate with my bachelor's of arts in sociology with my certificate in the social dimensions of health. And I'm moving on to the master's program with the other 2 certificate programs in nonprofit sector management and in applied social research methods. So I think that, again, I think college students need support. I think high school students need support. I think that not enough resources are being provided to a lot of the students in the school systems throughout the state of Maryland, not just in Baltimore City, but throughout the state of Maryland and throughout the country. those are just examples of what the teacher shortages look like. You have a lot of teachers retiring or quitting their professions in clusters because they they are overwhelmed, and they feel overwhelmed, and they feel like their jobs are not being appreciated as much as they should be appreciated. A lot of teachers have thrown in the towel because they feel like the job is too stressful. You have to really, really learn how to be flexible if you want to become an educator. You have to be there for the students. You have to be present for the community members. You have to be present for the people who look to you for your influence. And with that note, I'm going to turn it over and introduce you all to Miss April Christina Curly, educator in the city of Baltimore and the Baltimore City School Board candidate for the general election. Now, Miss April, thanks again for taking time out to speak to me about the work that you do as an educator and about your campaign. I know you've been really, really busy with your campaign and with reaching out to community members and really getting your face and your name out there so that people can learn more about you. So we're going to jump right into it. So could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and why you decided to run for the city school board during this election? Because this is a very, very imperative election. It's a historical election. I've spoken to some of the other candidates already, so I'm familiar with how the races look. So could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to become an educator, especially for the city school system?
Yeah, well, first of all, um, thank you so much, Nelson, for having me. I really do appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and also, give folks the opportunity to hear from me and learn about who I am and my experience and why I think I would make a good fit as a school board member. So thank you for the opportunity. I like to introduce myself as my name is April Christina Curly, and I am a queer Black woman whose family identifies as poor. And all of those parts of my identity are important for me to mention because that is, the core of who I am and has fueled me and sort of is what drives me in my career path. And it is 100% the reason I've decided to put my hat in the ring for school board. And so, I am someone who comes from a background that's experienced lots of things that so many families across Baltimore City have also experienced. And I think that, having a lived, shared, cultural background with the folks who, you want to be in community with is important. And so for that reason, I just, I feel compelled to be an advocate for the students and the families and the teachers here in Baltimore City. And so that's why I'm running.
Yes, absolutely. I like I stated before, I've spoken to some of the other candidates, some of the other people who are going to be candidates for the general election. So I've learned a lot about what the city school board looks like and how really how much influence the city school board has and what the chain of command and what the checks and balances look like. I've learned a lot about that through the candidates that I've spoken to already. So my next question is, I guess you've already answered a couple of them, but um, what inspired you to become an educator, and what inspired you to really, really um, pursue a career as a teacher? Because being a teacher is a very tough job. Being a teacher requires you to be flexible. Being a teacher requires you to be present for the students, for the parents, and for the community members. And I've in the first 15 minutes of the show, I read about from the PBS NewsHour about many of the teacher shortages around the country, especially in the southeastern United States. People are retiring and quitting their jobs in clusters because a lot of the educators, they feel overwhelmed
Mhm.
um, with the demands that have been put forth by their administrators and by their bosses to really be there for the students, and to really again demonstrate that flexibility and provide them with those additional resources.
Mhm.
Could you tell us a little bit about what made you become an educator? Because a lot of people think that it's just about you having a degree or you pursuing your education, and a lot of people just look at it as a job that, pays your bills and feeds your families, is something that's a 9 to 5 job. A lot of people treat it like it's just a job. Like,
Mhm.
it's no big deal. I can do the bare minimum and just get by. But a lot of people don't understand how much influence you do have as an educator, and how that can make and break a lot of students. And, you see in the news all the time about generations of students who, unfortunately, have fallen through the cracks, and who've been robbed and cheated of those opportunities to really live up to their fullest potential. So could you tell us a little bit about what that looks like for you and your experience in the classroom? Because you can truly relate to the educators in terms of what it looks like behind the scenes. A lot of people just look at, a lot of people read about it and a lot of people see it on TV, but a lot of people don't know what goes on behind the scenes, because a lot of people aren't active in the school system. So they don't know what goes on behind the scenes.
Mhm.
So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, to give more context into like you asked why I decided to pursue a career in education. And the reality is I knew very early on that I wanted to be a teacher. I was one of those kids who sort of knew like this is my calling, this is my spark. And so I, went to school for education as an undergrad. And really, the most important thing that I think influenced that decision was the fact that my mom is both of my parents are from Baltimore, and my father is a graduate of City College. My mom, who is my hero, is a high school dropout. And so, both of my parents were sort of given the shorter end of the stick. And because they weren't afforded, an excellent education, they have not seen life outcomes that are favorable. And so my mom made a very, critical decision early on and decided to raise my siblings and I in Howard County, which, she knew that by having, you know, just being in the right zip code would afford my siblings and I an excellent public education opportunity. And she was right. And my mom worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs, to raise my siblings and I, my 5 siblings and I, in a 3-bedroom apartment just to make sure that we could receive an amazing public school education. And so I knew, that what I was receiving in terms of my schooling experience compared to what my cousins right down the road, quite literally, miles down the road, were receiving, I knew that there was a difference. And I knew that I wanted to make sure that I could empower students, no matter what zip code they live in, to create, opportunities for themselves to, be whatever it is they want to be in life. So when I, graduated from undergrad, I was the only one in my cohort of, 50 or so, students who graduated with an education degree. I was the only one, the single one who said, I'm going proudly to teach in Baltimore City, because that is where the most brilliant students and the most passionate teachers exist. And so I, decided to enter into a classroom experience that I knew would be challenging, but I also knew I would be equipped to make a change in. And the last thing that I'll say with that is that, again, I grew up in a home that I saw, domestic violence. I saw parents that struggled with substance abuse. I grew up extremely poor. And so I think that those lived experiences can be shared with so many other families across Baltimore City. And so I wanted to make sure that as a teacher in the classroom, I was my kids' best advocate, because I knew all too well some of the experiences that they were living through, because I myself had lived through those experiences. And so, yeah, that's what, motivated me to start my career in education. And I think that, from that point forward up until now, I've been able to sort of keep at my core and at the center my love and passion for Black and Brown communities and poor communities, and oftentimes how those two intersect with one another. And so my passion to run for school board at this point is really about, creating long lasting impact and change that actually gets to the core and the root of so many of the issues that we, as citizens of Baltimore City have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And so I no longer want to, put a Band-Aid solution on symptoms. I want to make sure that we are now starting to drill down and understand, oppressive systems at its core, so that we can continue to actually address the root issues and create a systemic wide change for the families and the students and the teachers of Baltimore City.
Yes, absolutely. And I really like the fact that, you're homegrown. So you understand, because a lot of students, and they need candidates like you, because a lot of people, they don't want to teach in the Baltimore City school system, and it's not even about the pay gap that exists between the teachers in Baltimore City and teachers in places like Howard County or Montgomery County. A lot of a lot of educators, they don't want to be subjected to the work environment. They don't want to be subjected to the school environment, in the city of Baltimore, and that's why a lot of people are very apprehensive about going to teach in the Baltimore City school systems. And I like the fact that, again, you were able to make those connections clear that you have to the city of Baltimore, because a lot of students grow up in similar situations like yourself. A lot of them do witness domestic violence. A lot of them do have parents that struggle with substance abuse or alcoholism. A lot of students really need that guidance and really need that direction. So they do need role models and people in their corner to really vouch for them. And I think that a lot of the issues that are taking place now is because they don't really have adults that they trust to really vouch for them, because they feel like a lot of the adults just try to, like you said, put band-aid solutions on the problems, and instead of actually getting to the basic root of all of the issues. Or a lot of them feel like just throwing money at the issue is just going to solve problems.
Mhm.
And you get this snowball effect that we see now, where the problems escalate and escalate and escalate, and to the point where it's out of control. And a lot of students, a lot of the violence and a lot of the crime that we see on TV, it's because a lot of young people, it's just a manifestation of the anger and frustration that they have, about the adults in their lives, not vouching for them, not supporting them, not protecting them, not being, their, number one supporter. So
Mhm.
it's great that you have that connection, to a lot of the students, because a lot of students need that, because they automatically assume that people don't understand what it's like to grow up witnessing what they witness. So
Mhm.
that's really great.
Mhm.
So I know that you've been busy during the election season. I guess my next question is, who has been your mentor? Because this you had to. I know you can't do all this alone, so I know that you have to have a lot of people in your corner in order to make this successful. I do understand that, you have to do your homework in order to run for an election. You have to really be familiar with how things look behind the scenes.
Mhm.
And I told you before, I'm a sociology student, so I took a sociology of education course at the beginning of the pandemic, remotely, and I was able to really read about the marginalized communities that are affected by the lack of quality education, not just in the city of Baltimore, but throughout the state of Maryland and throughout the country. So how have you been doing your homework, and who has mentored you throughout this election season? Because I know you can't do all this by yourself.
Mhm.
You need help from other people who you really trust and who can really vouch for you.
Mhm. I appreciate this question because I think it also, you know, brings to the forefront, which should be at the top of every candidate's mind, which is we have so much to listen to and learn and grow and understand. And no matter what the skill set is that we bring to the table, or even, a lived experience, that's not enough. You have to be able to surround yourself with people who are going to, give you excellent insight and challenge you to really think about the systemic issues that need to be tackled in ways that are innovative and smart and really just really effective that again others may not be thinking about. And so I love this question, and I've tried my best to keep folks in my corner who I can continuously learn from. One of my greatest mentors right now is Reginald Benbow, who was a state delegate candidate, and didn't win the primary election, but just ran just the most brilliant campaign I've ever witnessed. And so he's really sort of been who I'm trying to model myself after. He is someone who is homegrown. He has so many lived experiences. He's also a former teacher here. And he's just been really, really smart and humble and creative. And so I love, his passion. And so I've tried to take as many notes as possible from Reggie. And so I want to give my kudos to him. And obviously, I have my tried and true mentors, the folks who have sort of seen me since I was 18 years old and I was, a child who was just, trying to learn all the things. And I was, someone who wasn't as polished as I could have been. And so I've had wonderful Black women in my life who have poured into me and sort of given me some direction in how to seek an office like this. And then, I really have tried to keep my ear to the ground. My students have been my mentors. You understand, my former colleagues who are still teaching have been my mentors. My family members who are in the classrooms have been my mentors. Because again, this as a decision is not about me. It's about the community and the people. And so therefore they need to be the ones instructing me and telling me what it is they want to see out of a candidate. And so, I have, I think, a solid skill set that is going to lend itself very nicely if I should win a seat. But I also want to be very clear that those 2 seats that are up right now are the people's seat. They belong to the people, and therefore the people should be at the forefront of any decisions or any, strategy or approach that I'm thinking about. They should be the ones guiding that and leading that. And so I'd say collectively, those are all the folks who have sort of poured into me as I'm running for office. And then part of your other question, Nelson, is really, I have tried to drive a campaign forward with a small but mighty team. I think that because I am a first-time candidate and this is all so new to me, I'm learning so much as I go. And so while, I think that I've been really smart and strategic about the campaign that I've run, there are so many lessons and so many things that I think I could do better. And so in the next go round, I think that, I'll definitely continue to apply the lessons that I've learned in this, sprint to November and hopefully, be more thoughtful about a campaign if I'm running again in the future.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks again, for providing insight into, what the question that I asked, because I think it's important for everyone to have mentors, especially when you're entering into something new and when you're unfamiliar with, um, things like this. I think that mentors are really helpful. Everyone needs people in their corner that they really trust and who can really, again, vouch for them. And a lot of the issues that we're talking about as it pertains to education, these are nonpartisan issues. So whoever wins those 2 seats, like you said, those are the people's seats, because a lot of people don't understand that, they're the ones who have the power. Everyone is working on their behalf in order to, make the community a better community to live in and work in and thrive in, because, this is about all of us. It's not just about, the candidates. It's not just about the students. It's not just about the teachers. This is about all of us.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, I like the fact that you were able to, share that, because a lot of people don't understand that they're the ones with the power. Everyone works for us.
Mm-hmm.
And if they see something that they don't like, they have the power to get rid of it.
Right.
They have the power to, again, use their voice and use and exercise their right to vote in order to make a difference.
Right.
I find that a lot of people don't do their homework and they just vote for people who are familiar faces rather than really, really digging deep and really understanding what they're about. And I think that it's important for the candidates and people who, operate or I guess work, as part of the school board. I think it's important for them to be there and be present for the community members to ask questions, regardless of what they have to ask. I think that they need to be prepared at all costs. I think that the forums need to be open to the public. And a lot of people don't understand that in the city of Baltimore, the school board, delegates these things.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people automatically assume that the school CEO and the mayor, they have the authority to make these decisions and say, this policy stays and this policy goes. And that's not the case. And it has never been the case. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's important for people to attend town hall meetings, forums, so that they can really learn about that process and get to know the school board members. How important is it for you to be as transparent and to hold people accountable? What does that look like to you? Because that's a huge problem for the school systems, not just in the city of Baltimore, but also throughout the state of Maryland and throughout the country, in terms of the accountability. A lot of people make excuses for why things are the way they are. And you have, again, like I stated earlier, you have generations of students falling through the cracks. And I just feel like, every time I listen to a town hall meeting or every time I go to a community forum, I feel like we're kind of like chasing our butts, year after year after year, every election, because people keep saying the same thing and expecting something different.
Yeah.
So what does accountability and transparency look like for you as a candidate, as someone of with influence, and as someone who's taking on this responsibility to clean up the generations and generations of uh, uh, of community members being marginalized and disenfranchised?
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. And, one of the things that you'll learn about me and anybody who talks to me, even for 5 seconds, is that I am, almost transparent to a fault. I, am someone who I don't sugarcoat. I say what I mean what I say, and I don't say it mean. Right. I am direct, and I am very, clear in what I stand for and what I believe in. And so accountability, for me is a natural thing anyway, but I also think that that sentiment is increased when you are elected by the citizens, by the people, because then you need to understand that, the people who elected you should very much be a part of, whatever strategy, approach, and decision making needs to happen when you are in that seat. Like, the people belong in those conversations. And so exactly what you said, beyond town halls or forums, there just need to be innovative structures in place. It's 2022. We should have things in place where parents and community members and businesses and industry leaders, everyone can sort of be a part of the conversation when we're talking about solutions to, strengthening Baltimore City public school system. And so, one of the things I can guarantee is that if I should win, I will 100% be the most a transparent and accountable, candidate that anybody probably has seen in a while. And it will be a breath of fresh air, because I don't know any other way to be. And I think that, with some of the things that we've seen happen really in the last few months, we talk about, one of our children, being killed at school in the first week of school. We talk about, thousands of students being passed from grade to grade without, them actually, mastering core skill sets, which is criminal. We talk about, a student who had a severe disability, and they didn't have, the school that he was at didn't have the actual human resources to accommodate him. That is criminal. And so when we talk about issues that are that, severe and egregious, we need answers, and we need someone to be able to have a dialogue and a conversation with us that can reassure us that they are working on it with some urgency. And I feel like that is really missing right now, especially with, our current city school leadership. And this is not a criticism of their skill set or talent more than it is, a criticism of their boldness or their ability to be radical in the public eye. And that is one thing that I am committed to being, because it's just who I am. The last thing I'll say there is that, I am, if you check my track record and look at the receipts, right? A quick search online will sort of show you who I am and in my character. But one of the things that people, will say about me time and time again is that I am fearless. I am unafraid. I am 100% willing to, put my reputation on the line and who I am, my soul on the line, because when we don't have answers to, the bigger, really chilling things that are happening in our community, then I'm going to be the one to ask the tough questions. And I'm going to go in, if I win a seat, and I'm going to look people in the eye, and I'm going to ask those tough questions, and I'm going to shake it up, because we need someone with a radical vision and a radical backbone that can go in and really say something's got to give. We're in the state of emergency with Baltimore State Public Schools, and we need to figure out what we're going to do right now, not in 2 years, not in 3 years, not in 4 years, but right now, because our kids are quite literally dying right now. And so I am the person that's unafraid. I'm going to go in, and the parents and the community members and everybody else involved is going to know what everything that April is saying and doing, because I'm the person that's going to be very clear in my communication.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You're going to be accessible and always present and available for anyone in the community who has any questions or concerns about anything related to the school system. So that's something that I was able to gather from listening to you at one of the town hall meetings, and also a couple of months ago when I had visited the school board candidates at the school, and when I listened to your speech, that's what I was able to gather. Like, you and the other two ladies, you guys are very upfront and honest about your work, and about about really being as transparent as possible, and holding yourself to the fire if you need to, and not being afraid to, like you said, answer the tough questions that come from the community members. And I think that, again, holding yourself accountable means taking the hit when things go wrong, because a lot of people want credit for what's done well, but sometimes it's not just about kissing the babies and cutting the ribbons of the new school systems. That's the good stuff that everyone wants to get credit for. But like with the crime and with the violence, kids falling behind, that's the stuff that needs to be addressed, and that's the stuff that's not filled with rainbows and sunshine that needs to be addressed. So you have to be available at all costs. So why do you think? My next question is, why do you think that many marginalized communities exist in the city of Baltimore? Because I've learned a lot about the city of Baltimore through my mom. She was born and raised in Baltimore City. She attended public school in Baltimore City. She attended college in Baltimore City. So I was able to learn a lot through her. And my dad also was educated, and he was born in the city of Baltimore and was educated through the school system. I do have extended family members who were born and raised in Baltimore City and went through the school system through Baltimore. So generations of people in my family, they were able to tell me about what Baltimore used to look like, because it wasn't always, what it is now. So the generations, decades of this has, transpired. So why do you think the marginalized communities exist, and why do you think it's very difficult to provide those resources in order to meet those needs in communities that are not very popular? Because you do see how each community in Baltimore City is segregated because of the type of education each student is receiving. And this is not even about race and ethnicity. This is about the socioeconomic status. This is about redlining. This is about all those things. So why do you think the marginalized communities exist, and how can we look for resources in order to meet those needs? Because you have schools in Roland Park, for example, that are great schools and that people want their children to receive a quality education, but you also have schools that are not very popular and that people shun in neighborhoods like Sandtown, Winchester. So how can we connect the resources to ensure that everyone is treated fairly?
Yep. Nelson, you've got great questions. Love this. And, I really also appreciate just the homework you've done, because you understand, my answer to that question is a very clear one, which is that for decades, Baltimore has experienced extreme systemic oppression and racism and classism and all of the isms, right? And we've sort of been ignored and neglected by the state at large. And so, I definitely see that as we, think about what Baltimore's future looks like, we absolutely need to make sure that we have a governor who's going to commit to prioritizing Baltimore City and Baltimore City's needs, as as the governor who's going to champion that. Because again, when we talk about the economic sort of noose that exists around Baltimore City, you literally can go miles outside the radius and see the pockets of wealth that exist. And somehow, some way, Baltimore City is still struggling, with basic necessities, where there's extreme food insecurity, where there are food deserts, where housing is a huge issue here, when there are so many vacant homes that we could give to homeless people, and yet we've still chosen to not do that, where folks don't have job opportunities, where they have to feel like they have to participate in, the underground economy of, just trying to make ends meet. And so you do what you need to do to feed your family, right? These are all of the things that are a reflection of decades long systemic oppression. And so one of the things I definitely want to see is, as I mentioned, I want to see a governor come in who's going to say Baltimore City is at my heart, and therefore I'm going to make sure that whatever we do budget wise, we're going to prioritize whatever emergency funds we need to, so that Baltimore has a little bit of love and support to get them, in a place where we can start to dig ourselves out. The other thing I want to be very clear about is that, I feel like there are, lots of folks who run for office here locally and have, the people's best interest at heart for the most part. But what is really telling is, when I was going door to door and, being out in the streets and just trying to talk to as many people as possible, it was me and Reggie knocking on doors in neighborhoods that other candidates were afraid to knock on. And this is not a reflection of school board candidates, because I love all of my opponents. They are wonderful humans. But I just mean, folks who are running for delegate seats or other seats. It was very clear the neighborhoods that they prioritize when doing outreach, right? Because they know what it takes to get a vote, and to get elected. But when it comes down to actually doing the work, that work looks very segregated still. And so I want to hold our elected officials accountable. Those who are local servants, they should be held accountable for, working to undo so much of, the damage that's been done because of oppression and oppressive systems. And so in order to actively undo that, we need to first admit that the reason we're in the position that we're in now is because we've been neglected. It's because there are, 80-90% of our community are people of color and poor people. And we have been intentionally left behind by the state and by everybody else. And so the last thing I'll say is that Charm City is Charm City for a reason, right? If you ask those of us who live here and pay taxes here, we love it. I'm not going anywhere. You will never find me moving anywhere. I will forever remain in Baltimore City because I love it here, which means I am committed to making this a place where I'm going to raise a family, where everybody else who's raising their kids here knows that their kid can go to the neighborhood school and is going to receive a phenomenal education. And that is why I'm running, to make sure that we can continue to make, Baltimore a better, more charming city than it already is, so that folks can, live their lives here and just be happy, thoughtful contributors to our overall community.
Yes, absolutely. And I love it, because, this is about the legacy of the city of Baltimore. This is about, again, making sure that generations of children have a foundation to fall back on, when they grow and as they prosper. Because, because a lot, because again, and it breaks my heart, because, I've interviewed tons of people from the city of Baltimore, tons of community organizers and activists. I've interviewed some of the local public officials, elected officials. I've emailed a lot of I've emailed and sat down with a lot of community members, and I've spoken to a lot of people who are doing amazing work in the city of Baltimore. And unfortunately, that doesn't get showcased as often as it should. So, we have a lot of talented people who live and work in the city of Baltimore. You have a lot of people who are very creative and innovative, and who can definitely use their passion in order to make a difference. And I think that needs to be recognized much more often. My next question is, what has been the most difficult part about running for the first time as a city school board candidate? Like, what kind of obstacles have you learned about in terms of what you've already faced? Because I know that running a campaign and running in an election is not easy. And this is not even about the opponents or about you. It's just like in terms of how you connect with people. So what's been the most difficult part about that throughout this entire process?
Yeah, I'll say a couple things. The first is with just this process in and of itself. I've taken a lot of notes, because win or lose, I think I said this earlier, I'm going to somehow package the lessons so that I can keep them for the next, the next iteration of a campaign for me. And more importantly, so that others who want to pursue this pathway but come from, the same circumstances that I come from, can feel empowered to do that. Because let me tell you, this process has been extremely difficult for a degular citizen like me, right? Somebody who said, I want to run, I want to make a difference, I want to be, someone who can be held accountable for making a difference, and let me figure out how to do this process. And so while I've had some coaching from, Lee, who is an organization that's helped first time candidates run, mostly it's been me trying to figure it out, right? The paperwork has been difficult. And I'm somebody who has 2 degrees. I've worked for Google for 6 years. Like, generally, I have a skill set that should be able to navigate this, and it's still been very difficult for me. And so I think about all of the amazing, capable, wonderful community members who really should be running for office, who feel somewhat defeated or in some ways discouraged because this process was intentionally created to keep us from running, to keep us out of the elected process, because they don't want folks like us to be in power. The people who are actually of the people, they don't want us there. And so I know that this system was created, and therefore I've had to navigate it, and I continue to push forward. Okay. I have, had, like I said, a small and mighty team, and together we're learning these ropes together. And, the other thing I'll say is with, again, someone like me, Nelson, who my family identifies as low income. I do not identify as someone who is wealthy. I have to work for a living. I can't take time off. I don't have family who can contribute hundreds of thousands of dollars to my campaign. You understand? Like, I am someone who has to be very much thoughtful about how I drive a campaign forward, while also trying to work 2 jobs to make ends meet. And that is quite literally my circumstance, right? So I say that because, again, this has not been a cakewalk. And I love that I get to be the guinea pig for this kind of experience, so that I can empower others who look like me, tatted up, who talk like me, who have families like mine, right? Who come from where I come from. I want people like me to run for office, because we deserve to be the ones who have the voice, because we are of the people. And so, yes, I appreciate you asking that question, because this has not been easy, but I have not stopped yet, because I do believe so much in the power of this office, that if I should win, I know that it is, not to be played with, and that power should absolutely be used effectively to proactively, positively, and drastically change the trajectory of the families' lives, the students' lives, the teachers' lives here in Baltimore.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. So my last question before we wrap up this show and the interview and this has been a really, really riveting conversation. My last question is, so how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your campaign and about the work that you do and that you have done as an educator? And what are your last words for the listeners who tuned in and who are still trying to do their homework before the general election, and who are still trying to figure out, okay, how do we move forward? Where do we start? Because a lot of students are in the classroom right now, no teacher, and a lot of parents are worried about what the academic year is going to look like. A lot of people don't know what to do moving forward. So a lot of people are very fearful about what the future looks like and what the outcome will be at the end of the academic year. So how can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about your campaign and about your work? And what are your last words?
Thank you. So, electapril.com. Please go visit my website, because there I try to spell out who I am and what I believe in, what my platform is sort of built upon. So please go read more there. Send me an email or a note, electapril@gmail.com. I will answer your email, and I will make sure, that somebody on my team can get some time on my calendar, because I do want to talk to the community. I want to talk to more folks. And so please, hit me up in any of those. I'm also on Twitter at Real Abril. And you'll be able to keep up with updates from my social media. But I think the last thing I'll say is, I really do appreciate Baltimore City voters. I think that but I think voters in general get a bad rep that they sometimes get to the polls and they don't know, who they're voting for. And I actually think that we're getting better, especially as we, start to see all of the things that need fixing. We want to be smart about who we're electing to get the job done. And so I want to encourage people to read up on all the candidates, but make sure, that you are, voting with a sense of community and collective community, and not just what's good for you and your child or your family, but what's good for all of us collectively, because that is the only way, right? A rising tide lifts all, right? And so I want to encourage people, out of 8 candidates, I won my primary in second place. And there's a reason for that. And that reason is because I think the voters want right now somebody who is radical and who can go in and really make some transformational change, and who's going to be fearless in doing that, and who's going to be innovative and brilliant in doing that. And I am all of those pieces. And not only that, I come from this, right? I have lived this. And so I think that the voters want someone who they can trust is going to go in and get the job done on day one, not 4 years from now, but on day one, because just like you said, Nelson, we are in a state of emergency and people are nervous, and they should elect someone who is not nervous, who's fearless, and going to go in and really shake some things up. And so if that is what you believe in, please join me in my campaign, electapril.com. And, I win or lose, I'm still going to continue to do work for my people and for the community, and I'm not going anywhere. This is just the beginning for us. So thank you, Nelson. I appreciate you so much for all that you're doing and for having me today, because I loved this conversation, and I hope that you and I can continue it after.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks again for taking time out to talk with the listeners. I know that you were able to really provide the listeners with a lot of great insight with everything that you shared. So I will definitely touch base with you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Okay, I'll see you later.
Okay,
Bye.
bye. Well, that wraps up another edition of the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome Guy Radio. I'm happy that you guys had another opportunity to really tune in and listen to the show. Next week on the Beauty in Us Radio, right here on Awesome God Radio from 6 to 7 p.m., we are going to have 2 ladies with us to talk about their work as podcasters and as authors. So I'm just trying to pull everything up so I can provide you all with the information. So the Book Breakers podcast is the podcast that I will be interviewed by. So we have Miss Barbara Johnson and Miss Tisha Winkler, who are going to be a part of the broadcast next week on Tuesday, September 20th from 6 to 7 p.m. So both ladies will be a part of the show, and both ladies will be a part of the broadcast so that we can definitely learn more about their work. So again, make sure that you all subscribe to Awesome Guide Radio on YouTube. Make sure that you go to awesome.radio, awesomegodradio.com to visit our website and our content. We have amazing things going on here at Awesome God Radio. We have such a great team. You can listen to some of the shows from some of my colleagues, but Miss Barbara Johnson and Miss Tisha Winkler are the hosts of the Book Breakers podcast. But Miss Barbara Johnson is also a teacher who worked in the Baltimore City public school system for over 20 years, and she taught elementary school. But she is also the CEO of BJ Publishing LLC and has been a ghostwriter and has published books for several people. So we'll learn more about her work next week on Tuesday, September 20th from 6 to 7 p.m. And her colleague, Miss Tisha Winkler, who is also the co-host of the Book Breakers podcast that I will be interviewed by. So they're going to sit down with us and talk about the work that they do for the Book Breakers podcast. And Miss Barbara Johnson is going to speak more about her work in the Baltimore City public school system as an educator for the elementary school students. And she will also speak to us about her publishing company, BJ Publishing LLC, and her work as a ghostwriter and what her services look like. So again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I don't take any of this for granted. I'm happy that you guys have been able to tune into each and every one of my shows. It's been 2 years since I started my broadcast. It hasn't been easy. I've had to really navigate through all of the challenges in the middle of the pandemic. In the midst of the pandemic, and even with all of the obstacles that have taken place, I encourage you all to visit awesomeguidradio.com if you want to learn more about the station and about some of my colleagues. You can also reach out to me on Instagram at Nelson E. Brown and on Twitter at Nelson E. Brown. You can also reach me on LinkedIn and on Facebook at Nelson Brown. And you can also shoot me an email directly at brownnelsone@gmail.com. And I promise I will respond to you all as soon as I possibly can. This has been a great experience. I hope you all learned a lot from Miss April Christina Curly. She's one of the candidates, and she's one of the young ladies that I've been able to work closely with throughout the past few months with the work that she's doing, because we're all passionate about being an advocate for the people throughout the community. We're all passionate about the children and about the families in this community. So I hope you all take some time out to really visit her website and to really take a look at awesomeguideradio.com to see what we have. Again, this is the Beauty in Us Radio right here on Awesome Guide Radio. I will see you all next week as we speak to the hosts of the Book Breakers podcast, Ms. Tisha Winkler and Ms. Barbara Johnson, and as we speak more about her work as an educator for over 20 years for the public school system, and about the BJ Publishing LLC, her book publishing company, and about her work as a ghostwriter. So I love you all, I appreciate you all, and I will see you all next week. Take care.